things are going on. That's what I'm trying to impress upon you with the mattering, and sometimes they're morphing around and changing. And so the question as a therapist becomes, which path am I going to take? I'm going to intervene here, I'm going to intervene here. And when I supervise my students, that's one of the questions that they know I'm going to ask them. Why did you ask about her mother rather than about so-and-so? And because I'm trying to get here by starting here. And I don't want to go here yet because it's too soon, or the kinds of decisions that experienced therapists make, but that maybe you don't even make consciously. So you're thinking of yourself on a map where there are always tributaries and different paths and so on. What's going to happen if I go here? And maybe this is maybe this idea is something of the age I am now, also because I think about that a lot. What if I had taken this path? What if Kelly had been there when I got to Ohio State? What if I had married this person instead of that person? I would have had a completely different life. There's a certain age when that, some of you recognize it, where it clicks on in your brain. And so I think therapy is the same way. What if I take, and you can train yourself to do it much more quickly, which is, what if I go here and what if I go there? What's going to happen with this person? Okay. Rather than, what I see done so often is that therapists try to reduce rather than complexify. To reduce a therapy to one narrative or one cause or one conflict that they call underlying. And I don't think there is one cause. I think there's all this interacting energetic fields going on all the time. I'll just do this briefly because it's complicated to try to freeze this idea. You know, I prefer when people learn it that they learn it in their minds rather than on paper, because it freezes it and it makes it a snapshot like the diagnosis does. But just for the sake of freezing it so you can get another idea about how to use it. And one of the things that I think about, a lot of what we call disorders are, you could think of as disorders of mattering. Somebody is too intense about something, too detached about something. You could make a whole map of mattering as a replacement for the DSM, which I sorely wish somebody would do. Get rid of that book. And that book, just to say, I think is a cultural novel. It's another way to think about it. It's an interesting story of what we see in our times. So one of the things that I've sometimes done as an exercise that works in groups or that works for therapy is to have people draw their own mattering map. The problem with it is how quickly it changes. But imagine if somebody comes into therapy and they draw their own mattering map. This is what really matters to me today. Now, one of the things that happens in therapy is you have your own mattering map. And it says, I have to see where the ideas are constructed. Maybe. I don't know, what's the first thing they would want to think? I don't want to make a caricature out of the work that you do, since I don't know that. But let's say, okay, I'm looking for a pattern of where this person has faulty thinking that interferes with their feelings, for example. And the person is saying something else. So one of the interesting things to do is to get the and this equalizes power in a certain way, is to get the client's mattering map in there as well as your own. And then possibly the cultures, because you can't close the door and think you're not sitting in a culture. And so one of the things you can do is work with those as templates. People can do the mattering map. This is very pragmatic for me, so I just want you all to appreciate how much I hate being pragmatic. And it's worked well to do it before a session and after a session. To have a client come back with it and show you how the mattering map was during the week. Because one of the problems we have with doing therapy is we see the person for 50 minutes and they have a whole other week of life. And that's part of what we tried to deal with in the early feminist therapy days. But you really can't hang with them for a month to find out what it's really about. You really have to confront it.
What might such a map look like?
It looks all different ways because I haven't personally been able to freeze it yet, so I ask people to do it, and one of the things that's interesting is they draw totally different things when you ask them to. And some people are very like linear, and I try to ask them to do it from the center out, like what matters the most. Some of them will draw people, some of them will draw concepts. It's very interesting just to not tell them and see what they draw. And it would be interesting for you to all try, because I don't know what your mattering maps look like when you go to therapy, so but it would be interesting for you to know. So that's just a little bit. I do trainings actually and how to use it in therapy, so I'm just trying to give you a little bit of the flavor of these things. And I want to give you a couple of examples of the mattering map and how it moves. Because once you train yourself to look at it, you can see it move right in the middle of when you're talking to somebody. And you've all had that experience. You're talking about this, and all of a sudden you realize you're talking about that, right? So, here's one. Women professional had reached what's called the third age in Latin America. It's a good term, I like it. That means she's over 60. People respond to her much as they always have, that is, in terms of appearance. A common cultural experience for women especially. Yet the ways in which appearance matters morph with age. This appearance may matter on their individual maps and the cultural one in terms of perceived age in the following ways. This is just some of the ways. Her credibility or perceived wisdom may increase in some ways. In a more anonymous public setting, she may be just as easily treated as fragile and in need of assistance or even senile. As the context changes, the mattering changes. And they change in different cultures. I just want to give you one cultural example that's about the United States and our cultural mattering map. The cultural mattering map in the United States conflates race and nationality a lot, for those of you who aren't aware of it. And we call a lot of things race that are called other things in other countries. And one of the ways that that plays itself out, since I live in Latin America part of the year, I'm aware of this about Latinos and Latin culture. Very few North Americans are aware that citizens of Latin countries can be and are black, white, or red. The minute they cross the border, they're magically transformed into people of color on the North American mattering map. Some accept this designation, others resist it and become confused. I've had many Costa Rican friends and colleagues say to me, in my own country, I'm white. Seemingly, the North American eye cannot see white in conjunction with a Spanish accent. It does not compute. And I've had the experience of talking to somebody in Spanish and somebody else comes by and says, but you look white. Why are you speaking Spanish? The other thing, just a simple example that I do in my ethnicity class sometime that I'll mention to you, is because one year it was quite interesting. We had somebody from Greece, a student from Greece and a student from Mexico. And as you know, on the American map, one of those is considered white and one is not, right? Now, I had them put their arms next to each other, and the skin of the Greek man was darker than the skin of the Mexican. So that's just to tell you that to use your eyes to know this. And if your eyes weren't being controlled and colonized by the culture, you would have all seen that already. That there's something wrong here. Because there are a lot of Mexicans who are white, there are some who are black, why do Greeks get to be white people? There's a history of it. There's also a very interesting book called, there are two of them, How the Irish Became White and How the Jews Became White. And those are two groups that weren't considered white when they first came to the United States. And so how they morphed and how the cultural mattering map changed so that now Jews and Irish are considered white. So it depends on what being white means. And I could do examples like this all day, but I won't. And part of this is that human senses only perceive a narrow bandwidth to start with, but a lot of what we perceive is what our culture tells us to perceive. So like you're all familiar with the Mueller-Lyer? You're not? Okay, it's an illusion where you make an arrow, and if you put the things in and the things out, at the end, one looks longer than the other. It doesn't work in most cultures. It works in our culture. So the Gestaltists have done some interesting things, but they forgot about culture. They forgot about